Hey RevMatch family, welcome back. I am here in the 2018 Civic Type R and I'm going to go for a quick little test drive. I'm not going to bore you with the stats and all that kind of data because there's plenty of publications that can tell you that stuff, but I'm going to tell you how it feels to drive this car. And what was really fun is we just came up here, we're in on Angeles Crest, we're in the forest. Just came up, I was in my Audi S3 a moment ago, and this car was behind me and in front of me. We switched places a little bit, and man, this thing is pretty quick. He had no trouble keeping up with me in my Audi S3, which actually has, oops, the Audi S3 has a little bit, about the same amount of horsepower, but this is a couple hundred pounds lighter. This is about 300 pounds lighter. This weighs 3,100 pounds. My Audi S3 weighs about 3,450. And woo, this thing, she's quick. She is quick. Easy to rev match. And man, this thing has a lot of grip. Props to Honda. All right, so this is just my first time driving it here. And initial impressions are, there is a lot of front end grip in this car. This is a lot more than my S3 actually, which is a heavier car. This is a ton of front end grip, and I'm not getting any understeer at all here. I'm not pushing it a lot, but I am pushing it a little bit. No problem at all. Now it doesn't like to rev as much as the old Honda, obviously, the old KA motor, but 6,500 RPM, plenty of power. We're slowing down here. We got some traffic. So let's talk about the interior while I'm going a little bit slower here. It's got this really nice sort of Alcantara style cloth slash Alcantara. It feels much like Alcantara, but it's got a little bit of a cloth texture to it also. It's got some very nice faux carbon fiber pieces on the dash, which I kind of like. They certainly feel like carbon fiber to me. They fooled me. And yes, that is a Rolls in front of us, or is that a Bentley? That's a Bentley. That is the new Bentley. I'll take a couple of pictures of that in a few minutes. So I really, really like these seats. These seats have a lot of bolstering to them. They're probably the best seats I've ever sat in a Honda, to be honest. They've got so much lateral, so much side support here around my legs and my torso. Very comfortable. I think I could do a long trip on this easily. Now we're not going super fast here, but let me talk about the suspension really quickly. This is it's a pretty smooth road. I'm in, I guess the sport mode right now, which is I'm not sure what it's called, I think dynamic or something like that. So it's the sportiest mode. This has dynamic suspension in it. It's got 3 different modes, and the dampers will change the range of motion that they are in based upon the setting that you're in. So if you're in the sportiest mode, performance mode, don't know what it's called, sorry Honda fans, the range of motion will be a little bit less than in the comfort mode, where you're gonna have a little bit more range of motion. This thing has some pretty big beefy Brembo brakes on it. I'm not quite sure how big they are, but it's got the classic red Brembo calipers. They look really nice, and I haven't done a hard stop in them yet, but I can tell from the drive on the way up here in my car, we were hoofing it, and this car has better brakes than mine because I had to brake a little bit earlier. My car has, I've been abusing the brakes a little bit, and so it just doesn't seem to have the braking performance that this one does. This is also sitting on 245 tires. They are, I think they're Continental something. I think they might be the Continental Conti Sport. I could be wrong in that though. Seems pretty grippy. But Honda has done a really nice job with this car, and I think they've done a really nice job with its chassis in general, or chassis as people like to say. I'm not sure what it is. The chassis is very, it's very firm. It's structurally really sound. It's very rigid is what I'm trying to say. Man, this car just wants to go. It's a very rigid chassis. And it's pretty big. I mean, this is about as big as the old Accords were from the early 90s. So this is a relatively big car. I mean, it's not a big car, but it's a relatively usable car because you've got a full back seat. I sat back there. I sat behind me. I had leg room. I did a little live stream earlier. The trunk is pretty big and generous as well. So this is, of course, a Japanese car, and the Japanese, especially Honda, are not one to do a lot of things that you don't need to have them there. So there's a lot of aero in this car, and this car actually makes downforce, which is pretty cool for a car of this class. All right, third gear, let's do a quick pull. This car is legitimately quick. This is the fastest Honda, aside from the NSX, that I've been in. This car is legitimately quick. I mean, so what strikes me about this car is the level of refinement and where Honda is today as a manufacturer. This has a great ride. Like I say, we're in the most aggressive mode right now. It's still quite comfortable. I would imagine that around town, the comfort mode is going to be pretty comfortable and fairly compliant. But there's a couple things that kind of stand out in this car, which I like a lot. One is the steering feel. Of course, this is an electric rack. The steering feel is actually really, really good. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I can feel what's going on the road. I can feel the imperfections. I haven't been able to drive it fast enough to get into any kind of understeer mode yet. But the guy that brought the car up said he didn't feel any understeer, and I definitely did in the same spots. It's, of course, front-wheel drive. I haven't noticed any torque steer yet at all. It seems to really put down the power quite nicely. No problem at all. Haven't tried flooring it coming out of a tight turn yet, but I would imagine it's going to do pretty well in that regard. Yeah, you know, let me talk about electric steering for just a minute. There's a lot of manufacturers that have been doing it. I'm familiar with the newer BMWs, which I'm not a fan of at all. I think they're actually completely devoid of feel. Sorry, I'm a BMW guy. I've got a couple BMWs. I prefer the old hydraulic racks by far. I've got an Audi S3. It's not bad. To me, so far, this has got more feedback than any of the cars that I just mentioned. Haven't been able to get on the brakes very hard yet, but I imagine they're going to be pretty good. I'm going to try a hard stop in a little bit when I get a chance. But this car is super, super playful. Here we are going at 36 miles an hour. Yeah, this car likes to go. All right, there's the red line, about 6,700 it felt like. It's pulling pretty strong up to the red line. And this car has got a lot of stick. This car's got a lot of mechanical grip. This is pretty impressive to me. Now, it's pretty hot out here, and once I get on it, the AC cuts out very quickly, be that as it may. And that Continental is, he's trying real hard. That's a 5,600 pound car. I don't think it likes this stuff very much. But this car, this loves these little roads here. This is super easy to drive. I don't think anybody would have much difficulty with this car going quickly at all. I don't know, but it feels like I could get this car to rotate a little bit if I jumped off the throttle on track. Not anywhere around here, of course. I'm not going at those kinds of speeds, but it feels like the back end would want to play with me, which I think is pretty cool, especially for a Honda. Okay, I'm going to stand on the brakes here in a second once we get out of this corner. Let's just see how the brakes feel. All right, the brakes are really good. The brakes are impressive. Get back in third. The brakes are very good. And there we are. Full throttle. Yeah, this car is playful and it's pretty quick, to be honest. This is a seriously quick little car. This is impressive. This is way above any SI before. This is way above that. And I am surprised at how well this car handles 306 horsepower. It has no problem at all putting down the power. There's no torque steer. I'm on an undulating road, but there's no torque steer that I can discern here. So yeah, this car has really good turn-in, I've noticed. It responds immediately to inputs. I would certainly not call it darty, but it is very responsive to steering inputs, especially at initial turn-in. Pretty nice. All right, we're coming up on a corner here. Hello, cyclists. All right, so now I'm gonna have an opportunity to lay down the power. Let's see, coming out of a corner full throttle, let's see what happens. All right, the traction control kicks in, hit the rev limiter. Oh, it's got these nice red lights when you hit the rev limiter. That's pretty cool. All right, so there is a hint of torque steer on a road like this, but not much. Honda has done a really great job, some kind of suspension magic with the geometry here to reduce torque steer. I've never been in a front-wheel drive car as powerful as this that had as little torque steer as this does. It seems to be absolutely minimal to, in my mind. Yeah, this is an edgy car. I like this, except for the AC that keeps deciding it wants to cut out. Let's talk about the transmission for a second. Let me see. I'm going to try to do a little heel and toe here in a second, which is probably a bit low, but no problem at all. Super easy to flip the throttle and rev match. Rev match, that's what I do. That's my channel. I understand this has automatic rev matching as well. Haven't turned it on yet. I'm driving quickly here, so I'm not going to mess with that. But I could show you a little bit at the end of the video. I could show you how to turn on that particular feature. This is a great transmission. This is classic Honda, even though it's a front-wheel drive, and I'm assuming this is operated by, I don't know if it's a cable. It's got to be a cable, but the shifting is really got that nice Honda snick kind of thing. It feels very direct. It feels very positive. There's no slop in it at all. I would compare this. It's not as good as the S2000. It's not as good as the Mazda Miata, but this is really, really good. This is classic Honda shifting. The clutch is a little heavier than your typical Honda. The range of engagement is fairly large in this car, so I think it's going to be pretty easy to drive for somebody who's not that used to driving a manual transmission. I don't think this would be too difficult. I think it'd be pretty easy, actually, so if you're a little bit hesitant about driving a manual, and this car, of course, only comes in the manual. Thank you, Honda. Thank you so much for that, because save the manuals. We need more manuals here. So easy to rev match this thing. Yes, only a manual transmission. Kudos to that Bentley for just trying and trying and trying. Yeah, I can tell, just going around these corners, that this car will rotate a little bit if you get off the throttle, which I'm a big fan of. So that's going to be able to counteract some understeer. I'm willing to bet if I get in the middle of a corner and I lift off the gas, I'm willing to bet with the traction control off, it's going to come around and it's going to play. It seems like a really, really nicely set up chassis. So my overall impressions about this car, I really like this car. It's very playful. There's really not a lot of torque steer in the thing. It turns in really nicely. I think this car will rotate if I get into a corner and I lift off. Can't tell here. I like the way it drives. It's still very, very civilized. There's no question that you're driving a Honda. It's not overly firm. It's not overly aggressive, but this car definitely wants to come out and play. I would put this in the same category as, for example, like the Focus RS, or maybe a Subaru WRX STI. That car is a lot older technology. This feels a lot more modern. I like this motor a lot. There's a little bit of turbo lag, very, very little. It's very eager and willing to go. It's lighter than the other cars that I mentioned. I think the only car that's going to have a comparable power to weight ratio is the Focus RS, which has 350 horsepower, but it weighs a bit more. This has 306 horsepower, I believe, and it weighs about 3117, giving it a power to weight ratio of about 10 pounds per horsepower, which is very similar to the Focus RS. I'm not driving them back to back. That's a pretty quick car. This feels subjectively a little bit faster. That's all-wheel drive, obviously. This car is very playful. That's the phrase that comes to mind. And you know what? I really like the steering in this car. I really like the steering. This is one of the better, in my opinion, electronic steering racks that I have driven yet. Kudos to Honda for this. Transmission's great. The brakes are superb in this car. This is a fun hot hatch. I'm working on a couple of project cars. I've got an E30 race car, which we're going back to the track. That's the new series. We've broken it a few times. We're taking it back to the track. I've got a Project 240 SX, which I've been working on a little while. I'm going to put an oil cooler on that. I'm going to do a diff in there. I'm going to do a rear brake swap. If you like that kind of stuff, and if you want to see some more car reviews like this, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I appreciate you guys so much. I appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming out, and I'll see you guys in a couple of days.